Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked. Coming up, who's going to be showing UEFA competitions across Europe and how much money have they made? What happened when Cristiano Ronaldo went to the White House? The latest on Gianni Infantino's week, and news from the world of Formula One and Felipe Massa challenging his F1 defeat from many years ago. But we're all together at a very consequential Premier League meeting. Martyn Ziegler from the Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times, and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News.
Yeah, guys, good to see you in a West London hotel where we were doorstepping the executives, chairman, chief executives of the 20 clubs who gathered. So it is actually probably one of the most perhaps important meeting of the last decade because it dealt with the future financial regulations.
Chinese 12 years ago, it was all about financial fair play. Then it was about profit and sustainability rules. They're now all out. We've got new rules for everyone to get used to and a new acronym.
Squad cost ratio. I mean, this isn't too brand new for listeners that they'll know probably that this is what UEFA uses. You can only spend a certain percentage of your revenue on player wages, the manager's wage, agents' fees, and transfers. Now that percentage is 85%. It will be from next season in the Premier League. UEFA have it at 70%.
That's linked to the revenue a club makes, and we'll get into a bit just what counts as revenue, just what counts as cost. So what has gone out is PSR, which is all about the ability to lose £105 million over 3 years.
Yes, it's a controversial one as well. Why is it controversial? Because in the last season and a half, we've had Nottingham Forest dock points, Everton dock points, situation with Leicester City, and it was a bit of a lightning rod for criticism from some side. So this is a way to leave that behind and look to the future, and a long time coming.
So this is regulating how much is being spent rather than how much is being lost by clubs.
Yes. So it's cost control. Here's a question for you guys. Which do you think is better, SCR or PSR, and why?
Well, they had to introduce this SCR because it's already in UEFA. So this season, 9 of the Premier League clubs already have to abide by it because they're in the Champions League, the Europa League, or the Conference League. And many more clubs will probably have ambitions of trying to qualify into Europe.
So the Premier League says SCR, squad cost ratio, has been designed to promote opportunity for all the clubs to aspire to greater success while protecting the competitive balance and compelling nature of the league. So fair enough, no problem. But if you're asking me which one's better, it depends which club. And if you look at who didn't support this, this was the tightest margin of victory for any motion that the Premier League has put on the table. So 6 clubs voted against this. One more and this wouldn't have passed. I think that is correct. Now, if you look at those, can you name those clubs before I go on?
The 6. I can name at least 4 of the 6.
Go on, that'll do.
Okay. Brentford, Bournemouth, Brighton, Crystal Palace. Probably
Okay.
Sunderland.
Fine.
Probably Fulham.
Now, Brighton's a really good one of why they didn't like this. Brighton's really well run. They were doing quite well under PSR. And you've seen the success they've had. They've been well run. And in view of teams like that, this is worse because they were handling their finances really well and prospering under those rules. This, some would say, and you could see the argument, does favour the big clubs. It allows them to make even bigger mistakes or keep making big mistakes and still be able to do quite well by dint of having these enormous revenues. Is that a fair criticism of SCR, guys?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think an even sort of bigger criticism of SCR is that it really does maintain the status quo. Everyone said that was a problem with PSR, that it sort of promoted the status quo and didn't let you grow. But actually, SCR, if you've got big revenues, then it sort of embeds that. If you don't have big revenues, it's much harder to grow, isn't it?
Big club victory.
Yeah, it is a big club victory. I actually, I spoke to the Palace chairman, Steve Parish, briefly as he was leaving, and he seemed fairly pragmatic about it. He just said, "Look, I could have told you 2 years ago when we first started talking about this that this is what would happen. The big clubs get their way."
And there was some concern that eventually the Championship could introduce it. So perhaps those clubs who most fear going down, Leeds United, apparently one of them may be, having only recently been in the Championship, could feel, well, could ratios introduced lower down the leagues?
Yeah, and one of the other elements of this, which we haven't got into, is, could one of you explain what happens if you breach the 85%? What happens?
Well, we're in green and red light territory, aren't we? So from the lower threshold to the upper threshold of breaches, that's 115% over. How's this going to work?
Yeah, so you can spend up to 85% of your revenue on those player costs. If you spend between 85 and 115%, then you pay a fine based as a multiple of how much you've exceeded that level by. And if you go over 115%, then you get a sporting sanction, a 6-point deduction, potentially more depending how big. To do it by 115%, I don't think anyone in the Premier League at the moment is in that position. The only thing to say is that if you do breach it and you pay this luxury tax, as it were, so you go over, you spend 100% of your revenue and player costs, then you'll have less of your red threshold comes down the following season, so you're more likely to get a sporting sanction. It's really quite complicated, but it's I think it's still quite unlikely people will get a sporting sanction.
And this luxury tax, the proceeds will be spread across the league, so some of the richer clubs can get even wealthier by receiving some of the fine from a club in breach.
These thresholds, 85%, that is going some to be spending that much of your income on wages anyway. To spend 115% of your income, that effectively is a very poorly run football club. So is this because, I don't know, a wealthy state or the world's richest person decides to take over, I don't know, Charlton Athletic or someone, and they're going for it? Is that why this exists, Ziggs?
Well, I mean, you say that sounds sort of out of this world, that 115%. Actually, that happens fairly regularly in the Championship. People are spending much more than they're earning in order chasing the dream.
In the Championship, yes.
Yeah.
For sure. And if you're Barcelona in the past, probably as well. And Chelsea needed to, of course, sell hotels and women's teams to themselves as well. Is that type of thing going to be allowed under these rules?
No, the loopholes have finally been closed. So, yes, you can't sell any capital assets to an associated company. You can't sell your women's team to an associated company and claim that as paper profit. So that is I think, a good thing, and I think most other people do. I mean, Aston Villa and Chelsea both breached the UEFA rule last season, which was 80%. So I think they would have been very close to breaching the Premier League rule had that been in place.
But has every loophole been closed? What does count as revenue? What counts as spending? So on the revenue front, if you got Beyonce at a stadium, does that count?
We'll put a ring on it. Absolutely right. They're in. Rolling Stones in, Rihanna in.
Satisfaction from there. What about spending? So it says very clearly it's player spending, agent spending, and head coach spending. Wonder if you could have a head coach maybe reassigned as the assistant coach who's paid more? Or would they say, actually, this is ridiculous, why'd we be paying your assistant more than your head coach?
Rob, you could imagine any team doing something like that. Would you? A Premier League team? Come on. Will they play these funny games?
I don't think they would get away with that one. I think it's too obvious. But I mean, I think around spending, I mean, it's a very interesting one with multi-club ownership models, in that if clubs can transfer some of their spend to this multi-club ownership thing. So, for example, if you have a
Why
direct
Scout subscription, for example?
what?
Like a subscription to a scouting database or
Yes,
something.
yes, exactly, something like that.
All your agent fees are loaded onto another club in the group because they originally signed the player.
I was going to say something more like that, actually, Rob. Yes, exactly that. In that, or you sign a player for another club in your ownership group, and then you transfer them to the other group without paying the agents, your other club without paying the agents' fees. That might be another way around it.
Would that be a related party transaction, or should I say an associated party transaction of some kind, and then get that sort of scrutiny?
Yes, but you might be able to save on the agents' fees. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
you're
There are.
trying to help them concoct a way to get round the rules before they've even been enforced. And while we're doing that, so 3 teams have sold women's teams so far. By the time these rules come in, do we think that the other 17 teams, while the barn doors are still open for PSR until the end of this season, will they be up for doing this, or does it not make any difference now?
I think only if you're close to the limit with PSR. Otherwise, there's no point doing it. Sorry.
An interesting point made online by Kelly Simmons, the former director of women's football at the FA, and she said this has to be a positive move that Premier League clubs will no longer be able to sell assets like women's teams to themselves to circumvent financial fair play rules. She said that she's been told that some clubs won't allow investment into their women's teams in case they needed to do a Chelsea or Everton, as they put it. I was concerned that this regulation was inadvertently preventing much needed investment into the women's game to drive standards and competitiveness.
That's super interesting that there's a corollary effect, a negative effect on the women's game as a result of this. So it's obviously really good that's been separated. I hadn't thought of that at all.
Yeah, good point from Kelly. There was one other very significant moment and vote at the Premier League meeting, and the one that has sort of grabbed the headlines beforehand, but actually turns out never really had a chance of getting voted in, and that was this thing about anchoring, this sort of inverted commas salary cap, where you would the top clubs would be limited to spending 5 times what the bottom club earned in TV money. So there was Manchester City, Manchester United are the original opponents of this, but launched a very sort of strong campaign and eventually had 12 clubs voting against it out of the 20, which is pretty significant.
The threat of action by players' unions and agents as well in the weeks beforehand. Why did they take it to the vote when it seemed so likely it would be defeated? Or is that just democracy still going through with the votes?
We asked about this, didn't we? What was the line on this? It was like they'd worked on it for so long, they'd had it in shadow. Is that right? And then they've been discussing it, so it was only right that it should finish the process. Was that accurate?
So I wrote that it was the biggest defeat ever for a proposal put forward by the Premier League executive, which I think sort of upset some people because they're saying, well, that's, the context is normally if something's not going to get we know something's not going to get voted in, then we don't submit it. So the question is, why do they submit it? And I suppose the answer is, one, they wanted it to go away for good, I think, and this is a way of doing it. I think also they wanted to get squad cost ratio in, and this is almost like let's have a vote on this. We will accept, we won't introduce anchoring if you back SCR, this sort of horse trading thing. And I think that happened.
Could you put some more skin on the bones? Because I don't get that. Like this anchoring thing was never going to go through. Did they really need to lobby that hard to get these others on side? This is the bit I don't understand. Like, why? How does that work when anchoring was a non-starter? Who are they getting on side to get this through? I don't. I've seen people say it. It's been written, all the rest of it. But just from a logical point of view, what's the point of that? Do they really need to really twist any arms for them not to go for anchoring, given that 12 teams have said no?
No, they don't need to twist any arms. But what they do is they need to twist arms to vote for SCR.
Yeah.
And as you said, they very nearly lost that vote. If there'd been one more vote, against it, they'd have lost that vote. So what the idea is, look, Yes, I know you don't like anchoring. Fine, vote for SCR, and then we'll help you vote at anchoring. Not saying the Premier League are saying that, but that's what the people who are like very anti-anchoring were saying. If you vote against anchoring, and then we'll get SCR through.
And in some ways, it allows them to claim that they've achieved something. Their opposition has managed to knock out one proposal while still getting through another. Above all, it was seen to be something that would hamper the Premier League's competitiveness against the rest of Europe. If you introduced the top-to-bottom anchoring, it didn't exist in other leagues, then it could impose this artificial salary cap that would impede perhaps the ability to sign players and keep players.
Yeah, maybe that. My just general thought on all of this, again, which I think both of you probably disagree with, is the idea that these clubs and the owners of these teams at this moment in time decide what the rules are for the Premier League. Not an external body, not something above them. It is the owners decide what's good for them in this moment. Just in terms of regulation, I always find personally things like that quite unhealthy.
So you'd hand the powers to the independent football regulator?
I'd hand the powers to a sports news podcast, if I'm honest with you, and then we'll get some sensible rules enforced.
Not, as you might say, some might say in politics, not some here today, gone tomorrow club executive to decide.
Exactly. We're here to stay, Rob.
So another bit of complication to factor into all of this, we wrap up the section, is the fact the Premier League has a different accounting period to UEFA. So while UEFA counts the calendar year, the Premier League counts the season for how you assess finances. This is going to add layers of complication, isn't it, for the club accountants?
Yeah, it does. I actually think it might be a bit easier for the Premier League doing it season by season, because the calendar year thing, because clubs don't sort of work on that basis, that they could potentially get caught out on that, I think, more often.
So above all, is this going to lead to clubs needing to generate even more revenue, or does it actually help them in this week where we've seen Arsenal lose one of their sponsors?
Yeah, lose is an interesting term or interesting terminology. Arsenal and Visit Rwanda, that controversial sleeve sponsorship is no more. That was worth about £10 million a season to Arsenal, but a lot of heartache, a lot of anger. There was even a fans group that said they would rather have Visit Tottenham on their sleeve. There was a poster made, or mural as well, about this. And this is the end of the term. But Arsenal have said, and the sponsorship has done what it needed to do. But the reality is this. 6 months ago, at the height of the civil war in the DRC, where some were accusing these M23 rebels of being backed by Rwanda, it was horrible, the scenes. Arsenal came under huge amounts of pressure. Of course, Rwanda also sponsor Paris Saint-Germain and Bayern Munich. But Arsenal were in the last throes of this deal. They've kept it up until this moment. And I'm led to believe that just let it naturally finish and let's not renew it was what they've decided to do here. Because it's not as if Rwanda have stopped spending on sports. They're going to keep doing this. Arsenal, it seems, have walked away. Should they have done more? Should they have said something at the time? Perhaps. But this kind of moment allows them to draw a line.
Although it doesn't expire to the end of the season. So if they win the Premier League, it will be with Visit Rwanda on their sleeves.
And Paul Kagame, the Rwandan leader, a big Arsenal fan, probably tweeting away, this time in praise of Arsenal, because we've seen him in the past, criticising team selections, substitutions, tactics online. I wonder if PK will be as energised without his country's logo on their sleeve.
Well, the official word from Arsenal was they said that it exceeded the original goals of the partnership, promoting conservation and sustainable tourism, inspiring millions of supporters to discover the country. Well, the three of us have all been there. I don't think it took the Arsenal sponsorship to get us there. It was actually FIFA.
Yeah, we've discovered Rwanda. So FIFA congresses, FIFA council meetings. And yeah, do you know what? I'd be interesting to know. We've not really seen the impact, the tourism impact, if that's what it's for. I often think with these type of deals, it's for something else. That soft power play, it's to get the country noticed. Visit Saudi, visit Rwanda, Qatar, all of it. How much of it is a tourism boon?
Well, is that why Cristiano Ronaldo was at the White House this week promoting Saudi Arabia?
That's a very good connection there, Rob. Congratulations. That's good. And why was Cristiano Ronaldo at the White House?
Why was Cristiano Ronaldo at the White House? So Ronaldo is currently owned by Saudi Arabia through the public investment fund's ownership of Al Nasser. He is paid astronomical amounts of money. He refers to Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince de facto leader, as the boss. And MBS was also at the White House for a meeting with Donald Trump, and he took Cristiano Ronaldo, the Saudi brand ambassador, along with him.
Quite notable returns to the United States. Mohammed bin Salman hadn't been to the United States since the aftermath of the death of Jamal Khashoggi in 2018 in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Still never found the body. Khashoggi, the Washington Post journalist, and Ronaldo hadn't been to the States for around a decade too.
Yeah, since 2016, 2017, when he had been accused in a civil suit of raping a woman called Catherine Mayorga. And he has, that suit has been thrown out of court, and Ronaldo has denied the accusations throughout that time.
Yes, no ongoing proceedings at all. She did waive her right to anonymity. He did say in 2018, I firmly deny the accusations being issued against me. Rape is an abominable crime that goes against everything that I am and believe in. Now, the reason he put the statement out then was because news of hush money emerged from football leaks. But to be very clear, there are no pending cases against Ronaldo.
Yeah, I was slightly disappointed because I was hoping there's going to be one of those Donald Trump sort of Oval Office moments where Ronaldo standing behind him while he's like talking about bombing Mexico, or but I think he just saves that for Gianni Infantino.
And the reason we have often mentioned Jamal Khashoggi in particular on this pod is because it came up in human rights conversations about whether to approve the public investment fund takeover of Newcastle United, also around the World Cup bid as well, which obviously is one, and Saudis will host it in 2034. I've had a chance to ask Saudis about it. Interestingly, in the Oval Office, when there was a question about Khashoggi, Trump did cut it off, but Mohammed bin Salman himself did engage in the question, talked about being a huge mistake, and we're doing our best that this doesn't happen again. So that came up at what was meant to be a big celebratory moment at the White House, this dinner for bin Salman, with Gianni Infantino there as well, and Cristiano Ronaldo.
The first glimpse we got of Ronaldo was at this lavish dinner with all the plutocrats, businessmen, technology, entrepreneurs, Saudi politicians, MBS, etc. And of course, who has to be there? Contractually, it feels like now, Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president. He was also at the White House a little bit earlier for an announcement, and I think that was a big deal for FIFA, and it's related to the question of visas for World Cup visitors. This is a big hot potato given America's tough line on immigration right now. What do we know about this visa announcement?
So is this FIFA pass effectively jumping the queue at the visa desk in your whatever respective country you're at?
Well, it stands for Priority Appointment Scheduling or Scheduling System.
It is not easy to get into the United States. I'm thinking about Iran. And I think there's a travel ban at the moment on Haiti as well, which had a first World Cup qualification since 1974. So, yeah, you can get to the front of the queue, but you're still not getting in.
And the State Department said that there'll be no exemptions for Haitian fans, unless they could be in Canada and Mexico.
And then you're hoping, if you're the US immigration officials and FIFA, I suppose, that they don't make it through the group, because the knockouts are going to be played in the US, aren't they?
Well, this was all brought up when Gianni Infantino was there. The White House World Cup task force was lined up behind Donald Trump in the Oval Office. And they said there would be these fast-tracked appointments to be able to get visas. And crucially saying, your ticket is not a visa. But it has been easier at more recent World Cups in some countries where we might have thought it would have been tougher to go to.
Yeah, Russia was. I think basically you if you got a ticket that effectively guaranteed you a visa in 2018.
You had to sign up online for a fan ID if you had your ticket number.
That's
Although it was
correct.
later
That's
discovered that
correct.
you could be using the same number repeatedly because the systems weren't linked to each other, which was probably quite a good data protection issue. And Qatar had the hire card, so you just had to sign up to the website and it got you into the country. But it's quite different anyway because, say, from Britain, tourists can go in without a visa, but you do need to apply for a visa to go into the United States as a tourist even. What about removing a World Cup host city just months before the tournament?
Well, that has also never happened. We are living in strange times. And while Gianni Infantino was in the Oval Office touting this visa pass, there was a question to Donald Trump, this time about Boston. He's spoken about Seattle, another host, and Los Angeles as well, I think, and talked about how if he deems these places unsafe, of course, these are all Democrat-run cities, he's just going to ask for those to be moved. But this time he was really emphatic. He turned to Gianni Infantino and he said, if I ask you to move Boston, which was the question in this case, you'll do it, wouldn't you, Gianni?
Yes, he said safety and security is the number one priority for a successful World Cup. So he surely knows as well, as we've seen in the Oval Office before, you don't go and dispute what Donald Trump's saying in front of his face in the White House. So maybe you then deal with that behind the scenes more delicately.
You are referring to the infamous meeting with the Ukrainian president some months back. Yeah.
Who holds the cards?
Who indeed?
Well, we end up talking about Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump each week, it seems, at the moment, because so much happens between them and the build up to this World Cup. But what about Gianni Infantino's former base at UEFA? Well, they're making more and more money, more and more success of the Champions League, as they would see it, particularly in the new format, because they've been out selling the rights to the Champions League, Europa League, Conference League for the 4-year cycle beginning 2027. And this was going to be the big test of this new partnership with what was the European Club Association, now is European Football Clubs, EFC, in this UC3 venture. And looks like the money's going to be rolling in for them.
Yeah, this is the five big nations: England, Germany, Italy, Spain, and France, all selling the rights at the same time, and with also a potential global pick of Tuesday night matches to potentially a streaming platform. That didn't happen. But yes, lots of money. 30% rise in Germany and Italy, 20% in the UK, 10% in Spain, and a slight decrease in France. So, but generally, sort of big bucks and some big changes with a new kid on the block.
Yes, Paramount Plus getting the bulk of rights in the UK for the Champions League. Only Prime Video has a game otherwise, a Tuesday night first pick in the Champions League. And that is Paramount Skydance, as they are now known, the owners of CBS, who have helped to breathe fresh life into Champions League coverage in the United States with those viral clips. And I was getting the sense a few months ago that UEFA really like that because it's all about growing the competition, spreading the word of it, particularly in a market where they weren't as entrenched. Whereas the rights have gone from Warner Bros. Discovery's TNT Sports.
Is a deal done by UEFA's new global rights partner for this sale, which is Relevant Sports, an American company owned by Miami Dolphins owner Stephen Ross. They already had rights to sell these Champions League and European club football rights for UEFA in the States, and they'd signed Paramount with the CBS group that Rob mentioned earlier. Now, there is a chance, I reckon, we'll see, if the output in the US, the one that UEFA seems to like, the one that gets all that social attention, might be what we get to see in the UK as well. It's been produced here in Britain anyway, so we might see some of that. Yeah, by IMG here in Britain.
There are further layers of intrigue in all this because Paramount is one of those bidding to buy Warner Brother Discovery, which is HBO, CNN, and TNT. Also in the running for part of Warner Brother Discovery is Comcast, the owners of NBC in the US, Sky in Europe as well.
There's so many layers of this. I mean, I think it's really important for all the sort of football bodies that you got this new entry to the market, because that means A, they're bringing more money in, and B, the existing rights holders have more money to spend on other football competitions. So it's a sort of win-win. The other interesting things that happen in the UK. So I think for the first time Sky Sports got the rights for the Europa League and the Conference League. So for the first time, we're going to have one broadcaster showing all of the Champions League bar one match on Amazon, and then one broadcaster showing all the Europa League and the Conference League. And the other interesting thing about Sky is that as the sort of aggregator, this works quite well for them. In fact, Francois Godard, who's a media analyst for Enders Analysis, he was telling me he thinks actually this increased fragmentation of the TV rights leaves Sky in a stronger position because they've got the biggest sports subscriber base, and then they can bundle up these things. So, for example, Sky can say, if you take us, take Sky Sports, and we will throw in, for an extra tenner, we'll throw in TNT Sports and Paramount. So it's pretty good news for them.
You mentioned fragmentation in the UK market. If there's an avid football fan who just can't get enough of football, how many subscriptions will they need to watch all of these different competitions, these different games?
Well, I mean, if you're a truly avid fan, maybe like 7. So you've got Sky Sports for Premier League, EFL, Europa League, Conference League. You've got TNT Sports for Premier League. You've got Amazon for the Tuesday night matches. You've got Paramount for the rest of the Champions League. Then you've got DAZN for Club World Cup and National League. Disney for La Liga and Women's Champions League. And Netflix, the Women's World Cup. And interestingly, Netflix came very close to winning some of the Champions League rights. They bid for the Champions League rights in Germany and were only just beaten by Paramount. And they also bid for the global rights for the UEFA Super Cup.
But they haven't announced the Super Cup deal, have they, this time yet?
No, and I think it's because they couldn't unwrap it from the Champions League rights. So I think it will just go in with who's won the bulk of the Champions League rights. That's yet to be confirmed, but it is an interest. Do you think it's? I mean, the Super Cup is not the thing that sort of grabs the attention. Do you think it's a strange one for Netflix to go for?
Well, they do these singular one-off events, don't they?
Yeah, I think Rob's right. I think that's exactly it. Look at what they do. They have these kind of nights of boxing, which we've seen. Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, we saw that card on Netflix. The idea of this one-off game, it's a Super Cup, it's not that important. It's probably quite cheap. Netflix aren't massive payers, and certainly when it comes to these like football and other sports. We've been talking about them for 20 years now. They've never come in with a massive bid for anything. This game can be shown around the world one time. I think we're going to see them maybe, I don't know. There's a finalissima coming up in March. Spain versus Argentina, the winners of Copa America versus the Euros. That's sort of a fixture that Netflix might like to do. I don't know who owns those rights. Maybe they've already been sold. But that type of thing isn't that surprising to me.
And Netflix also one of the bidders for Warner Brothers Discovery. So maybe they could end up owning TNT Sports, but it's a bidding process, wait to see where it lands, and also involves the regulators in the US tied to the Trump White House signing it off as well.
Interesting. The other thing to mention on Netflix is after them losing out, there is certainly an expectation that they're going to consider a sort of a foray into the Premier League, I should say, the next time those rights come up for grabs somewhere. And perhaps what would suit them is something like the Boxing Day games, that package that Amazon previously have had. So that's the sort of thing I think might suit them quite nicely, and also be a sort of good entry into the English football market.
Well, we thought DAZN might try to get a foothold. They're now the global home of football, as FIFA puts it, fresh with their Saudi backing. The only big win for them, they're going to show all the Europa League and Conference League in Germany. Does this show, despite the Saudi backing, they're not just putting some huge bids in to try to dominate the European broadcasting market, and they're still gently assessing what to do? Because if you look, say, in Spain, it's Telefonica, it's RTVE, the Spanish broadcasters. In France, it's Canal Plus and TF1.
Yeah. So far not, but also I think the Saudis generally have been relatively cautious about where they spend their money or where they direct it. If you think about the deal with FIFA for the Club World Cup and DAZN, and if you link it to getting the 2034 World Cup, it's not that expensive. If you think about a no-bid World Cup competition and getting it to your country, quite cheap. We've not seen them spray cash around in Newcastle. This so far, apart from these massive wages to football players, we haven't really seen masses of money being thrown out. David Ellison, the owner of Paramount, the chairman of Paramount, whose dad's very rich, Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, whose money's bankrolling all of this expense, was in Saudi Arabia recently. And you mentioned the Warner Brothers takeover or attempt to buy Warner Brothers. He, according to an article in the Financial Times recently, is courting Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states to help fund that purchase of Warner Brothers should it go through. So it's like a bunch of Russian dolls, isn't it? One on top of the other. And who knows where this all ends up.
Well, we'll wait for the announcement. Final discussion point on this week's pod. How much can you rely on a press release and a press announcement for the take on events? Because something dropped from Motorsport's world governing body, and it said the FIA succeeds in summary judgment application against Felipe Massa. This is the case relating to the 2008 Formula 1 World Championship. So if you just took the top line, you would think, oh, they had a big success at the High Court. The details, not quite that.
It's almost Orwellian, that statement. It was like, whatever groupthink or... It was completely the opposite. They sort of succeeded in having some of the grounds of this case that Massa's bringing sort of said that he can't proceed on that. But actually the judge said he threw out the effort for his court case against the motor racing bodies for the Crashgate scandal to be thrown out. And actually the court statement says that Massa can go to trial for this case, his £64 million compensation claim, because he has, open quotes, a real prospect of success, close quotes.
The only bit thrown out was the fact they would change the outcome of the championship in 2008. They said they will assess what happened in this crash, but not change the sporting result.
Yes, yeah, but it was quite mixed. I'm reading a statement here from the court on future litigation. The judge warned that any future litigation would not necessarily be plain sailing. Mr. Massa would need to overcome various obstacles on causation. If successful, Mr. Massa could, in principle, recover damages for lost career opportunities, but the court cannot be asked, as Rob said, to rewrite the outcome of the 2008 Drivers' Championship. So he's after £64 million.
This makes sense, Well done, Mr. Justice J. Because yes, Lewis Hamilton's 2008 World Drivers' Championship title will not be affected by whatever the outcome, and I think that's correct. But if there is proof that there's a conspiracy to cover up this deliberate crash by Nelson Piquet Jr. by Bernie Ecclestone and Max Mosley, they insist, or Bernie Ecclestone insists that wasn't the case, then compensation could be due. And so this is what the trial will focus on.
And such is the variety in the week. It was at the start of the week I was interviewing Jake Paul's manager, Nikita Bidarian, about the fight he's going to have against Anthony Joshua next month. Many questioning, is this a bit of a farce of a fight or a legitimate contest?
No comment.
Who cares? It's going to be on Netflix.
Streamed globally. Well, the rights for this pod have stayed the same this week, as has the lineup. And as ever, thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.